Hey everyone, I'm Rania Rizvi, the Inside Beat editor at the Daily Targum, and I'm here with my Inside Beat correspondent Lauren Bailey to discuss the rise and fall of boy bands.
Yeah.
All right, I think this topic was made for us. We were both boy band stans through
stands, like insane.
Absolutely. So before we get into, our really cringy One Direction fandom days, let's talk about like the technicalities of like what actually qualifies as a boy band, like what is a boy band. So from our wonderful source Wikipedia, boy bands are defined as a vocal group consisting of young male singers, usually in their teenage years or in their 20s at the time of their formation, singing love songs marketed towards young women. I think like that's a solid definition. My own personal definition is like, honestly, I think it's just like a group of hot dudes who like kind of know how to sing, mostly like 100% on the performing and just have like sex appeal and know how to like, get the ladies going. Like
it's always like pop music, like they just turn into big sensations.
Yeah.
They just have that like it factor,
Yes, the it factor. So like if you had to define the it factor, what do you think it is? Like if you think of like boy bands like Backstreet Boys or NSYNC, Jonas Brothers, we had to stand Big Time Rush. My sister loved Big Time Rush. Like what do you feel like all of the boys had in common other than like the fact that they made pop music?
I think it's just like one, the performance, two, they just have the look, like there's a very specific look that they need. And just the fact that they can reach women, and like young girls and turn themselves into a sensation. I just think it's like the whole package has to be perfect.
Yeah, for sure. And like it's interesting because the look of the boy band has like changed so much over time. Like before it was like, guys in like skinny jeans, super tight, like the tight t-shirts. They had like their like hair flat iron. Like I remember James from Big Time Rush, he would always like have his hair flat iron like that. Kind of had like the scene look going on. Oh my god, Joe Jonas, he literally looked like a emo boy, but that was like hot back then. So it's really interesting to see how like the aesthetic and like definition of boy band has kind of changed over time, but like we can all agree that they all have like a certain like charisma and sex appeal to them that all like the girls love. They're 100% made for the girls. I think we
oh my gosh, Nick Jonas was my first crush ever when I was like a child.
I always thought Joe was better looking. I was never everybody loved Nick. I think it's because he was the shy sensitive one, but he was just not. No, he was not.
He was it for me when I was like, I don't even know, like 8 years old. I was like, that is the man of my dreams. I'm like, what can I do to get Nick Jonas to fall in love with me? But I couldn't, obviously. I was 8 years old.
Things to think about. I think to consider, if Nick Jonas had straight hair, girls would not like him as much as they did.
That is true. I'm a big fan of the curly hair. I'm a big fan of the curly hair.
Two standout qualities, aside from being a good performer, is that he had diabetes and talked about it on Disney Channel, and then he had curly hair.
Right,
exactly. I don't remember anything else about early.
That's the thing. Like I was in love with this man, and I don't know anything else about him. That's the thing.
Oh my god, that's so funny.
But I loved it.
You know what's interesting though is that when we think about like 90s rock music or like even like 70s 80s, like I feel like boy bands are kind of a product of like the late 90s / early 2000s because nobody like went around saying that like, oh my god, my favorite boy band is Nirvana or Led Zeppelin or like Black Sabbath. Like nobody says that, even though by technicality like they are a group of young men who come together to vocalize and make music like the Wikipedia definition suggests. But like what do you feel like separates the male groups of back then from like a boy band of the modern times? Like what's that differentiation?
I think it's just the aesthetic and also the fact that it's pop music. I genuinely believe, I don't know why I just thought of this, but I think that if Frank Sinatra was in a band, he would be like in that time the ultimate like boy band boy. Like
he had like the charisma for sure.
And like at the time, like everything was rock music and it was very like going against culture, they were like feeding into the counterculture. But I think that boy bands go with the most popular thing.
100%. They definitely go with culture. I think that's a really good way of like looking at it, you know, because like aesthetics change with time, you know, like like the boy bands of the early 2000s don't necessarily look like the boy bands of now, but
Right.
it's kind of that whole sentiment that we are here to populate pop culture, we're here
Right.
to, you know, highlight the parts, like kind of like sell you on the fantasy, whereas like the 70s, 80s, 90s rock bands were like, screw the fantasy, screw you
Right.
all, capitalism sucks. Like,
Exactly.
so I think that's definitely like the major differentiation. If they had the same like charisma or they were more willing to
Right.
participate in mainstream culture, then I don't really see how like it's not necessarily the genre, it's the attitude. It's the
Right.
attitude that makes
Exactly.
a boy band. So who was your favorite boy band? Mine
Oh.
was One Direction. I still love them. I still listen to their stuff.
Oh
Although
my
after
gosh.
they split, I stopped keeping up with them.
Yeah,
Like
me
I'm
too.
Pakistani, Zayn is Pakistani. Like I have to look out for my people. Like he
Absolutely.
left and I was like, that's it.
Absolutely. And like Harry Styles is still out here being the man of everybody's dreams.
Harry Styles
But
is DILF energy through and through.
oh
Like
my God,
he's
I know.
so good.
He's amazing. I'm obsessed with him too. Which when I was a kid, I was such a Nile girl. Like through and through, I was a
Oh,
Nile girl.
you're
But like
okay. I find that all blondes are Nile girls. Maybe that's a generalization, but
honestly,
like I felt that it was the thing. Or hairy girls. They were
yes,
always like one of those two.
exactly. And also I think that it was because he's Irish and I'm Irish. And even though I literally have no sense of culture like at all, like my family is not like straight from Ireland or whatever, I was
Mhm.
like, oh, me too. I love you, you know, which is doesn't make sense, but I
You
loved
can
him.
resonate. Yeah,
But
and
like,
like, you know, it's stereotypically a lot of the brown girls like Zayn because like they
right,
saw themselves finally being represented on such a large scale too,
oh my
I might
gosh.
add. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I started out as a JB girl. I love the Jonas Brothers. I had this little like pink Disney Channel themed radio, and every single night before I went to bed, I had to listen to Love Bug. I had all their CDs.
Love Bug was a bop. Like
Oh my
that would get
gosh.
you in the feels. You
Oh
remember when
yeah.
it was like black and white and they
Mhm.
were all dressed up in suits. Oh, I
Yes.
remember it like it was yesterday.
Yup. And then I turned into One Direction. Jonas Brothers opened the door for me. And I'm not even kidding. All four walls in my room were covered with posters that I ripped out of magazines of One Direction.
Yes,
Everywhere I
same.
looked.
You got those magazines too,
Yes.
right? Because you didn't want to buy the $20 poster, so you buy the
Yes.
magazine and you rip out the mini posters and then
Mhm.
make the collage. Oh my god!
Yes.
So we
Like I
all
would
ate
drag my poor mother to Walmart to buy me all the Tiger Beat, all the I don't even know what they were. I don't know, but I was obsessed. I couldn't even blink without like I would see them when I closed my eyes because that was all I looked at all day. It was so bad.
Uh-huh.
It was so
I
bad. I
remember
would die
my
for them.
yeah, I remember my friend bought me one of those nice full-size posters.
Mhm.
Floored.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely floored. I could look
Yes.
at the boys, full color,
Yep.
full door. It was
Yep. And
wonderful.
remember how like when you were a kid on your phone, you would have the signature on your text messages?
Hmm.
Like mine were always like directioner or like something stupid. Like I was such a
That
weird
was
little
that's
girl.
intense.
Like,
That's
it
intense.
was
My
dedication.
Instagram profile picture was One Direction. It wasn't
Yep.
even like I was like, these men define me, which is kind of creepy. Like that's a
Right.
whole separate topic.
Right.
But
But
if
they
we
did.
no, but they 100% did. They literally own my heart. I am very sad to admit that I am a Liam girl. I think the Liam girls
I
have
love
suffered the
them.
most. Liam fell
Yeah.
off
I know.
terribly,
I know. I loved him though. He was
terribly.
so cute.
But we'll get to him. So if we're talking about One Direction as a band, you know, like statistically on a technical level, like One Direction was insanely popular. Like
Oh yeah.
it's and what I really think is interesting about One Direction was the speed at which they grew. You know, like
Yes.
a lot of boy bands have been around for at least a decade. You know, like
Mhm.
NSYNC was like a decade old. Like, you know, these people had time to kind of cultivate themselves in the fame. Like, so they did blow up, right? Every single boy band has like an intense blow up story. That's kind of what makes them so popular. But
Right.
they still had like, you know, time on their side, you know, like they became cultural
Right.
staples. One Direction's like career
Happened so fast.
so fast, and honestly, the majority of their popular works, you know, like Take Me Home, Up All Night, that
Mhm.
happened within a 5 year time span.
Right.
They're
Right.
nowhere near as old as some of the other boy bands
Mhm.
that we see dominating or were
Yeah.
dominating their industry back then. And you know, I read a bunch of articles about it, and like One Direction was definitely put under a sort of pressure that other bands
Right.
necessarily weren't. You know, they were managed
Oh my
by
god.
Simon Cowell. They became successful off of the X Factor show. Actually, they all they all came onto X Factor as solo performers, and then Simon Cowell was like, all right, like let me cook up a boy band and put them all together. Brilliant idea on his end, but I read like, you know, they got beat to death, you know, like they were doing tours after tours, albums after albums. Like these boys never,
were so young.
They were so young. They were
like
16 on the X Factor.
Yeah.
Yeah, so young, rose to fame so quickly, and they never took a freaking break, you know. It's crazy. And I wonder like why there was so much pressure on them to perform. Like
and it also just makes me so sad because it's like they didn't know each other going into this, you know, like they kind of got forced into it, and it's like they probably they were on X Factor, so they like wanted to become successful singers, but like they had no idea that this was gonna happen. They didn't even know each other. Yeah, like they were really just forced into it overnight, like a group of like 5 kids that didn't even know each other. You know, like
that's not to like deny the on-stage chemistry that they had or like their friendships. I'm sure they were able to make legitimate friendships over the years. It's kind of hard to stay in a band with people that you genuinely hate. But so I think their friendships like were legit. Yeah. But that is an interesting point that you bring up, that like it's kind of weird almost how they the friendships and whatever relationships they had were a bit manufactured, you know, like they weren't necessarily organic. And you want to know some fun One Direction trivia? Like these boys were so successful in their short career span. They have won 242 awards,
which is insane.
That is literally what the hell?
I know. Like that's
crazy.
And so impressive, but also like I can't even imagine just like how much they struggled having to do all that.
At what cost? Yeah, I think according to One Direction wiki, the onedirection.fandom.com, excuse me, they were nominated for a total of 366 awards.
That is insane.
I didn't even know there are 366 awards to be nominated for.
Right.
But
they did it. They did the damn thing.
So, you know, we're talking about like the appeal of boy bands, right? There's a lot of boy bands to stand, especially during the time we were growing up. You know, we could have liked, you know, one of like the pop punk ones like Fall Out Boy or
Oh my gosh.
Low.
All Time Low. I was such an All Time Low girl.
That's so interesting. A lot of my friends were. And then there's another like band that was really popular at the same time. Oh, 5 Seconds of Summer. That's the one that
yes.
Okay. So, you know, there were all these bands that you could have stand. What made you pick One Direction? Like, what was their appeal to you?
I don't even know, because I remember when What Makes You Beautiful first came out and everybody like started whatever. I was such a hater. I was like, this is so dumb. This song's not even good. They're just like, because I love to be like, I was like, I'm different. You know? Right. And then it was like, I'm different. I don't like One Direction. And then I don't know what happened to me, but like 0 to 100 so fast. I was like, I will die for these men. I'm obsessed with them all. I'm literally in love. My little 10-year-old heart was beating so hard. I don't know what it was, but like, I don't know. Their music was so good. They were so talented. I loved like all the little videos you would see of them, like
the video diaries.
Video diaries. That's what it's called. Yes, they were just so like fun and like they seemed so nice, and I was like, I want to hang out with them, but I'm also in love with them. You know.
That is such a good way to describe it. So when What Makes You Beautiful first came out, I think it came out in 2010, if I'm not mistaken. You know, I was instantly hooked. I was like, this is a banger. The first opening scene is actually Liam, and I remember I looked at his face and I was like, that is my husband. Like, he is gorgeous. Yeah, no, he had the floppy hair. I've always loved like the, you know, skinny boy floppy hair trope. Like that's my weakness. And he most definitely fulfilled that along with the other boys. And like, you know, sonically they are really good. Like they're talented people. Whether or not you like their music, you cannot say that they're not good at singing or that they don't sound good. They definitely do, which is why they're so successful. But then, like you mentioned, they became boys I wanted to hang out with, because, you know, first I was like, oh, I like their music, I think they sound good, they're so hot. But then what really made me a fan, like a directioner, was like falling into the trap of like the video diaries and seeing them, like the bloopers and the behind the scenes, and like just seeing, like you said, like they are just such performers, even at such a young age. Like they knew how to make people like them, and they knew how to make you feel like you're their best friend. You know,
Right.
like I would
Exactly.
coin their phases, like what's happening and whatnot. That was the
Yes.
phrase. I
Yes.
would say that because I was like, oh yeah, my friend, but like husband Zane, he says that.
Right. And then you would
So
like get into these little fights with all the other girls that were like, I'm a Liam girl. And I'd be like, no, I am, you know?
uh-huh,
Like,
uh-huh. Oh my god.
oh
And
my
then there was
gosh.
like those, and then there was like that niche of the population that was like, guys, like if you like One Direction truly, you shouldn't be a Liam or Harry girl. You're a One Direction girl.
Right.
You should
Right.
have
Right.
you love them all equally.
Right.
I remember those girls. I was like, shut the hell up. You
Yeah.
are Harry girl low key. Like, don't
I'm
even
like, let
lie.
me have my moment.
Let me have my moment. Exactly.
Right.
And you know, so talking about the appeal of boy bands, you know, like they're tailored towards teenagers, and teenagers love to have things to be obsessed with. You
Mhm.
know, they have the love songs. So you're already hormonal, you're in your feels all the time, 24/7,
Yep.
because you're a teenager. And then on top of that, you have these hot boys singing you these love songs, makes you
Right.
feel special, makes you feel wanted. I think that's really, if we're getting
Yes.
into the psychology of a boy band, like
Mhm.
that feeling of longing and wanting and feeling desired by a
Absolutely.
group of people, like that, having that illusion, you know, that these people
Right.
care about you, I think, is what
Absolutely.
makes girls so attached to them. Because you know,
Mhm.
if you want to take it to the psychology level, you know, maybe if you had like, especially if you have like an absent male presence. So like I don't really have like brothers or anything like that.
Mhm.
And then on top of that, I never really had like a lot of guy friends. So having like guys to look up to
Right.
wasn't very, you know, that wasn't a thing for me. And then I found these five role model guys that I could look up to and that I really
Mhm.
liked.
Right.
And I think that's where the attachment forms. And I think that is the case for a lot of girls who are growing up, you know. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So they definitely fill a certain void, you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
which sounds dramatic, but it is
But it
true.
did.
The
Yeah.
appeal to a teen fantasy, you know, like
Mhm.
of feeling loved and wanted, even if you yourself don't necessarily feel that way. Because also
Right.
when you're an insecure teenager, you know, you
Mhm.
want some sort of validation. So the boy bands definitely provide that for you.
Yes. And I think that that's like you're saying about fantasy, like that's a really good point too, because I remember like I never was into it at all, but there were like millions and millions and millions of the like fan fictions about them where they would like put them into their like life and
Mhm.
like be like, I have this like person who cares
Oh yeah,
about
my
me,
boyfriend
whatever.
Harry.
Yeah, yeah. And it made
Crazy.
the people that wrote them like feel good because they were missing something. You know what I mean?
Right, they were probably missing like, you know,
Mhm.
a male figure in their life or
Right.
companionship, or maybe they didn't want to feel alone, so writing
Right.
those stories.
And
And
it's
in
just like
doing
an
so,
escape from everything too, like
100%.
Mhm.
That is also a major thing, you know, like
Mhm.
when you're like all up in your feels and you're emo, like
Right,
you just want to bop to some good tunes, like listen
right.
to these guys, like be all
Mhm.
charming and fun. So yeah, no, for sure. And it's interesting to me that like even if the boy bands have like people like different personalities, like they all can be categorized into certain archetypes, like
Mhm.
you know, the bad boys. That was definitely Zayn. Like that was his thing.
Yep,
Zayn was his thing. He had like mirrors all the time.
yep.
And there was like, you know, the shy and like sensitive one. I don't really know which. I guess Niall might fall into that
Probably, yeah.
category. Yeah, and then like, you know, there's the heartthrob. So Harry was definitely the heartthrob. Like
Right.
all the girls were lined up for Mr. Styles at any given point of the day.
Oh my they still are, and I'm still
They
right
still
there.
are. I'm still lined up for Harry Styles. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
this man is so fine. He is so talented.
Mhm.
Oh,
He's amazing.
but you know, like you know what's interesting about Harry Styles is, you know, One Direction had a hiatus, right?
Yeah.
So they first Zayn left a couple years ago, and that was like shell shock news to the
Mhm.
world. I
Oh,
remember
yeah.
my heart audibly cracked.
Oh,
At
yeah.
this point, I was like, nah, like I'm not about One Direction as much anymore. Like I
Right.
kind of grown up a little bit, and my tastes were changing, and then this just kind of like, you know,
Oh, yeah.
re-solidified it because I knew that the sound wouldn't be the same without him. You know, each member
Right.
brings something to the table, and Zayn, given his strong vocals and his stage presence, like he definitely brought a lot to the band.
Right, and it's
So
also like when he left, it was like your whole childhood just ended, you know? Like,
right.
everything that you, like, loved and, like, invested, like, so many years into just was, like, done, and you're like, "Okay, what do I do now?" Which is so
Exactly.
crazy.
Exactly. And if we're talking about fantasy, right? Like we have like this fantasy that they're like, you know,
Right,
brothers, like they're never gonna split up, like they're always gonna
right.
last. And then when something is realized, like Zayn is leaving for mental health reasons, he's done with One Direction, you know, he
Mhm.
has a lot of personal problems. that's shell shock news to teenagers.
Right.
You know, because again, like we're sold a fantasy for so many years, and
Mhm.
then we get hit with reality out of nowhere that, like, you know,
Mhm.
this is manufactured. This is
Right.
still a business at the end. And, you know, Simon Cowell needs to do what he needs to do to cut his losses and keep the
Right.
band moving. You
Right.
know, it kind of opens up a more like cynical perspective on like these boys who otherwise sell us like a fantasy and an idealized version of life.
Mhm.
So, do you think that like boy bands have died out? Like the traditional 2000s boy band, because we have now seen the rise of the K-pop boy band, which is a second
Right.
of
That's what I
this
was gonna
century.
say.
But I'm talking about, you know, like the Big Time Rush, Jonas Brothers, One Direction, like that kind of boy band. Like, do you think their time is up?
I think right now, but I think also trends always come back.
Mm,
So, like, if you, like, look throughout, like, music history, everything, like, dies out and then one day it comes back, you know?
right.
So, I don't doubt that boy bands will become a thing again, especially now I'm thinking, like, with how obsessed people get with, like, TikTok boys and, like, YouTuber boys and all of that,
Mhm.
like, I don't doubt that there will be another boy band that will get the same attention. You know, I just think that, like, right now at the musical period that we're in, probably not, but then we also have, like, K-pop, like you said, which is a huge thing, just in a different way, but, like, yeah, I don't know. It's so hard to kind of, like, predict, but I do think that it will return one day.
I would have to agree with you. And do you feel like it's inevitable for bands to break up? Like they're always gonna end up kind of pursuing a solo career, or like can a
I
band truly last against the test of time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that things always kind of die out a little bit, whether bands
Mhm.
have like a big breakup or whatever. But I also just think the pressure that artists go through in the music industry, it's kind of inevitable for
Right.
things to end because they go through so much. And especially when you get to the insane level of popularity that like the Beatles and the Jonas Brothers and One Direction and all of that get, it's hard, you know?
So hard because you
Yeah.
fear failing, you fear letting people down. You know, you
Right.
have your labels do messed up things behind the scenes, like we already know
Mhm.
that. You know, they start using them as slaves, especially if they're bringing in as much money as One Direction did. Like these boys were so young, so
Right,
successful, and bringing in Simon Cowell and Sony millions and millions and
right.
millions. So obviously,
Yeah,
you know, they're not going to put the brakes on that because it's like, well, these boys are a cash
exactly.
grab.
Right, and I also think that, like, there comes a point where it's not popular anymore, and then their fame dies down because they're not, because trends move so fast, like, overnight,
Right.
everything changes every single day. So I feel like what was the entire worldwide phenomenon in one day could be like something that doesn't matter the next day. So it's hard to keep, like, I think if One Direction was still together now, I don't think that they would be as popular as they
Nearly as
were.
popular. No,
Yeah.
I would have to agree with you. Do you know anything about K-pop? And the reason I bring up K-pop is because like they are really reinventing like the
Oh, yeah.
2000s
Mhm.
boy band trope. Like we are seeing kind of like what you said, like a new cycling of a boy band
Mhm.
era, but like in a completely different direction from a completely different side of the world. Like what is
Right.
up with that? Where did these things come
Exactly.
from? I
But I
like
love
their
it.
music. I
Mhm.
do. I will
I
say like
have
I'm a BTS
never
stan, but
I love that for you. I have never listened to K-pop, and I probably should, but I just
good.
haven't.
It's
So I
a
don't
banger and a half though.
I know everybody loves it, and I'm always like, "All right, Lauren, like, one of these days you're gonna, like, listen to BTS or something," and then I just always forget. But I think that, um what was your question? I'm sorry.
Kind of like where do
I
you
got
feel
lost.
like the like why do you feel like the boy band resurrection is kind of going
Oh,
international?
yeah, I think the same thing where, like, trends move so fast all the time, it just kind of, like, shifts over a little bit and, like, back and forth all the time, and
Mhm.
I don't really know much about K-pop, like I said, but I do respect it, and I see a lot of similarities between, like, how they're big sensations, but then I also see things where they go through a lot of traumatic things in the industry as well. So,
Yeah.
I think it's very, very similar to what happened with One Direction.
100%. Like, you know, I don't want like the army to like come and attack me and say like, "Oh yeah, BTS is going to crash and burn like One Direction did." Like absolutely not. I'm not making any
Yeah,
claims like that. Nobody can predict the future, but
right.
I think like if we're talking about why the United States is so intrigued by international talent, I think we like things that are different and like others, and we like to westernize them, which is a whole different
It's a whole
topic.
like fetish.
Right. No, 100. Oh my God. That is the word. That is the word. The word of the day. Fetishize. Oh my God. Definitely. Even with One Direction, like they're not American. Like they're from the UK.
Exactly.
I think we're forgetting that. Oh my God.
And like the Beatles, the whole like British invasion and like rock and everything, like it's always we want something that's foreign because it's interesting to us. So we profit off of it.
They have accents.
Exactly.
Right.
Which is a whole other problem, I think. But at
That's
least they're getting their moment.
Yeah, no, that had me shook. Like that was the perfect way to describe it. But these like bands of like BTS and like smaller ones like Shiny and EXO and like, you know, there's a lot of popular K-pop bands, but I think BTS specifically like has like, you know, there's a lot of videos on the internet about the mess up stuff that happens behind the scenes, especially in like the K idol world. Like there was a thing trending a couple years ago about how like they have slave contracts, they get like worked to death. There's a Blackpink documentary where the girls kind of talk about how much work that they have to do. So they're like the female BTS almost. They're very popular. So yeah, you know, it is sad, and I'm sure like that is why a lot of these bands do fall apart, but some like the Jonas Brothers make the unique decision to come back. So what do you think of comebacks? I think we both agree that like the second time around is just never as good as the first.
Yeah, I think second time around, like you said, never as good as the first. But I think it's so nostalgic that you can't help but do it and to listen to it. You know? Right. I lost my mind when the Jonas Brothers were coming back because, like I said, they were my first like experience where I like was obsessed with something.
Do you think other than Joe Jonas, there's a band that needs to come back? I would love to see Zayn come back with One Direction just because I feel like he's been hurt, you know, like based off of his interview saying that, you know, he doesn't really associate himself with One Direction. He wouldn't listen to their music, you know, things like that. It shows like there's a lot of pain in the reason that he left. So I feel like it would be nice to see them all together again, you know, and kind of have like that trauma of being in a boy band and like having all that pressure on you be resolved in the sort of ways. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but you know, you never know, time can change.
I think it's like a lot of times boy bands like Backstreet Boys, I think that they did a little comeback thing once, but that was like decades later, you know? So I feel like if One Direction were to come back, which would be my dream, I think it would have to be
lose it.
Oh my God, it would have to be like so like when they're like old, you know what I mean? Because like they went through so much and like you have to heal from that before you go through it again. You know?
Absolutely. I think they all need that time to just be on their own, process like all the crap that they went through as kids. Because they were kids. That's what they were. They were kids.
Exactly.
And, you know, come to terms with it. You know, I really hope Zayn especially like finds his peace because I know he's been hurt a lot by like the racism that he had to deal with. You know.
Well, now he's a dad.
Yeah, now he's a dad and he has amazing.
Which is so crazy too, us being like this man that we were in love with is like a father.
He's like literally a father. Like that's so crazy. So upsetting too. I was like, damn, I thought he was gonna be my daddy, but I guess not.
But I love Gigi. That's my girl.
Yeah, you know, we have to
I love her. We have to.
Baddies, so we'll accept this one.
We'll accept it.
We'll let it slide. All right, but I guess that's all for today. So join us next time on Targum Tea for more reviews and talking about boy bands or whatever topic we decide to talk about that week. And be sure to follow the Daily Targum on our Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube for more wonderful content from me and my wonderful correspondents. Thank you so much, Lauren, for being on our episode today. It's always awesome chatting with you.
Having me. I love it.